Hello everyone, today I have a bit of a different video. I'm going to go over all the rulings on the interactions where a Pokemon uses the effect of an attack that is not printed on the Pokemon card itself. First of all, this video is going to start with a short introduction in which I will give a few disclaimers. Those are very important, please do not skip them. And I will also give a couple of special thanks. Then I will go over a few general concepts which are rulings that will apply in all of the cases that we will discuss today. Then I will go over all of the ways to copy an attack and one by one analyzing the rulings for those scenarios. And finally, I will have a few rulings on more specific interactions that I will leave to the end. So, disclaimers. First and foremost, this video is not an official source for rulings. I will cite my sources. You will find them in the comments. If you are looking for official TPCI rulings, so official rulings that I've used essentially as everywhere outside of Asia, you can find them on the Pokemon TCG rulings compendium at compendium.pokegym.net. This video may not cover everything, even if we suppose that I made no mistakes, it still may not be complete. And even if it is, one day it might be outdated. So whenever you have to find the reliable rulings, again, look at the compendium, not at this video. The sources that I've used for official rulings are, first of all, the compendium, which I will cite with just a number between square brackets. Then I also used the Ask the Rules Team forum, which is a forum at pokegym.net. It doesn't have the same official status as the Pokemon TCG Rules Compendium, but the answers come from essentially the same people. So, barring the occasional mistakes, they are basically as good as official. And I will cite them with an A before the number. And finally, I will also use TPC rulings. TPC rulings are those used in Japan and basically the rest of Asia. Those come from the Japanese website, which you can see the URL here. And I will cite them as J before the number. In general, it's worth noting that sometimes TPC rulings have differences compared to the TPCI rulings which we use. But in all cases that I cite, there are, to my knowledge, no differences. My focus is on the Eternal format, which uses TPCI rulings. But I may also talk about some cards that are banned in the Eternal format, and I will not give a warning every time I do so. If you're interested in looking at the Eternal ban list, here is the link, justinbasic.com/eternal. Okay, with those disclaimers out of the way, special thanks first to Glacial. You may recognize Glacial as the opponent in a few of the games I posted on this channel. Glacial had me make the outline for this video before I started properly writing it and then an outline, and we figured out a few things that should be added. And also massive special thanks to Shutterstock. Shutterstock is an actual Pokemon professor, unlike myself, and he is very active in the Justin Basil Discord server, in particular in the Rulings channel, giving answers to many questions, and Shutterstock really made my my research a whole lot easier, so many thanks to Shutterstock. So, what are the general concepts we will go over? First, we will look at the difference between Pokemon's attacks and an attack that a Pokemon has. This is a difference that can be found in official wording printed on the cards. Then we will look at a ruling that is very common knowledge in the Eternal format, which is Pokemon cards referring to themselves by name. Third, we will look at what the attacking Pokemon is. Again, this is official terminology. And finally, we will look at some necessary conditions for an attack to be copied. So, Pokemon's attacks is wording that means any attack used by that Pokemon. So, for example, here we have Cramorant, which has an ability that says if you have 4 or more cards in the lost zone, ignore all energy in this Pokemon's attack costs. This ability applies both to the attack cost of Spit Innocently, which is an attack printed on Cramorant, but also it applies to any other attack Cramorant may use. So, for example, if Cramorant has Technical Machine Blindside attached and you have 4 or more cards in the lost zone, then you do get to use the Blindside attack, ignoring its cost. On the other hand, an attack that a Pokemon has generally means just the attacks that are printed on the Pokemon card itself. There are a couple of exceptions, we will get to them, but in general it means just the one that is printed. So, for example, Festival Lead says if Festival Grounds is in play, this Pokemon may use an attack it has twice. This means this discipline can use Do the Wave twice. It cannot, however, use Do the Wave and then use Blindside, even if Festival Grounds is in play. Small side note, this is how attacks work, but abilities do not work exactly in the same way. For example, if we look here at Path to the Peak, it says Pokemon with the rulebox in play have no abilities. This only refers to the abilities that are printed on that Pokemon. So for example, if I have a Pokemon V with Forest Season attached, that Pokemon can still use Star Alchemy even when Path to the Peak is in play. So, for the purposes of this video, why is this distinction important? Only attacks that a Pokemon has can be copied by another Pokemon. So, for example, let's say I have Mew EX in the active spot. Mew EX has the Pokebody Versatile, which says it can use the attacks of all the Pokemon in play as its own. This means the attacks that any Pokemon in play has, but if one of my bench Pokemon, for example, has a Technical Machine Blindside attached, Versatile does not allow Mew EX to use Blindside. It only allows it to use the attacks printed on that bench Pokemon, for example. There are a few Pokemon that only have their attacks while they are in play. So if they're not in play, for example, if they're in the discard pile or in your hand or in the lost zone, even if an attack is printed on the card, the Pokemon does not have that attack. These are Pokemon Legend, Pokemon Break, and Pokemon V Union. You may notice that these Pokemon have one thing in common, which is that they are not complete Pokemon that can be put into play by themselves. However, Pokemon Level.X do have their attacks even while they are not in play, despite the fact that they also cannot be put into play by themselves, so there's a bit of a distinction there. Now, Pokemon cards are referring to themselves by name. For cards older than Black and White, when a Pokemon card refers to itself by name, it just means this Pokemon. So for example, looking at this Blissey, Energy Link says search your discard pile for an energy card and attach it to Blissey, it means to this Pokemon. So for example, if Mew EX from before were to copy Energy Link, it would attach that energy card to itself, to Mew EX, not to Blissey, wherever Blissey is. For newer cards, however, when a card refers to itself by name, then the name must actually match. So for example, if we look at Graplock here, its Octolock attack says until this Graplock leaves the active spot, etc. This means that if Mew EX were to use this attack would actually do nothing, because the name of Mew EX is not Graplocked. If somehow there were another Graplock that was able to copy this attack, then yes, it would work, but Mew EX cannot do this. So what is the attacking Pokemon? The attacking Pokemon is the Pokemon that is actually performing the attack. I'm not citing anything because this is actually just written in the rulebook. The rulebook does also mention that the attacking Pokemon is in the active spot, however there is an exception to this, which is Alakazam EX from 151, which has an attack that can be used even while that Pokemon is on the bench. We will discuss more about that attack later. Anyway, the attacking Pokemon is the one that is performing the attack. Weakness and resistance are always calculating using the attacking Pokemon's types, and any damage altering effects are always calculating using the attacking Pokemon. What does this mean, for example? We look here at Clefable EX. It has the Metronome attack, which says choose one of the defending Pokemon's attacks. Metronome copies the attack except for its energy cost. You must still do anything else in order to use that attack. So far so good. Then here comes some reminder text that basically reiterates what I've just said. No matter what type that Pokemon is, Clefable EX's type is still colorless, which reminds us about how weakness and resistance are supposed to work here. And Clefable EX performs that attack. So for example, if Clefable EX has a Muscle Man attached, then if Metronome copies an attack that would do some damage, then the damage is increased by 20. However, if Muscle Band is not attached to Clefable EX but to the defending Pokemon, then we completely ignore Muscle Band and Metronome just does the attack that is printed on the attack that you are copying. Should be noted that later cards have different versions of this sort of reminder text, or some even do not have it at all, but the rulings are still these ones. If an attack in its text says there are conditions necessary to use an attack, then those conditions need to be satisfied in order to use that attack. So for example, if I have this Sable with the Lost Mine attack, which says you can use this attack only if you have 10 or more cards in the Lost Zone, and I try to copy its attack in any way, shape or form, while I have less than 10 cards in the Lost Zone, then I will actually not be able to copy Lost Mine. So I will not be able to put the 12 damage counters, etc, etc. Another thing that needs to be respected is evolution lines. So for example, here we have this Abra, which has the Ultra Evolution attack, which says search your deck for Alakazam and put it onto Abra. This counts as evolving Abra. However, if I were to copy this attack with Mew EX, for example, I will not be able to evolve Mew-X into Alakazam, because Mew-X does not evolve into Alakazam. I still need to respect the evolution line. I would be able to copy this attack with another Abra or a Kadabra, if such an Abra or Kadabra existed, but not with anything else, really. If you copy a GX attack, this counts as using your GX attack. And if you already used your GX attack, you cannot copy one because you already have used it for your game. And the same essentially applies to V-Star powers. Pretty simple here. So now we get to all the different ways to copy an attack. First, there are actually a few cards that we will ignore because they're a bit too complex for the scope of this video, and they're banned in the Terran format anyway, so I felt like I could just push them to the side. However, for the sake of completeness, I will mention them. Other than those cards, there are basically two ways to copy an attack, which is one through anything other than another attack, and two through another attack. The ways to do that other than another attack are Pokemon Level X and Pokemon Break, which I will group together since they work in almost the same way, basically. Then there's Sabrina's Alakazam, which is a bit of a special case that we will treat by itself. And then there's basically anything else, so any other non-attack. And there are two main ways to copy through another attack, which is without copying the cost of the original attack and instead copying it. So which are the cards that we will ignore? First, there's these three cards, which have weird wording on them. For example, here Clefable says Metronome copies that attack except for its energy costs, so far so good, and anything else required in order to use that attack, such as discarding energy cards. This is a wording that contradicts the things about necessary conditions that I said earlier, and the degree to which you can ignore those necessary conditions is a bit too complex for my liking. I personally do not know all the specifics, and anyway, like I said, those are banned in Eternal, so I will just ignore them. And I will also ignore Ditto from Fossil and Brock's Ninetales. Those are Pokemon whose Pokemon powers allow them to become a copy of another Pokemon altogether, not just to copy their attacks, and this adds a layer of complexity which goes far beyond the scope of this video. So, what happens when we copy an attack through a non-attack? First thing to note is that you are actually using the attack you are copying. So, for example, if we have this Mew here, it can copy the attacks through its Pokebody Lost Link, which allows it to use all the attacks of all the Pokemon in the Lost Zone, as long as you still have the necessary energy. What does it mean that you're actually using the attack you're copying? For example, it means that if Mew copies Flare Strike from Cinderace X, Flare Strike says during your next turn this Pokemon cannot use Flare Strike. If Mew remains in play, it cannot use Flare Strike again during the next turn. And similarly, for another example that instead involves game state check, if Mew uses Cold Snap from Walrein, then during your next turn, you will not be able to use Cold Snap at all, because Cold Snap says if one of your Pokemon used Cold Snap during your last turn, this attack cannot be used. The attack cost is always copied, so you will always need to fulfill the original attack cost in order to copy it through a non-attack. Cost altering effects, of course, exist, and they are calculated using the attacking Pokemon. So, for example, let's look at Dimension Valley. It's a stadium card that says each Psychic Pokemon's attacks cost one color less. This means that if the Mew from the previous slide were to copy an attack while Dimension Valley is in play, then the attack cost will be reduced by one color less, and only one color less. So doesn't matter if the Pokemon that has the attack printed on it also happens to be Psychic. The reduction is only relative to Mew. Similarly with Counter Gain, also can reduce the attack cost by one color less. If Counter Gain is attached to Mew EX, for example, then it can reduce the attack by one color less, but if it's attached to the Pokemon that has the attack that Mew EX is copying, then we completely ignore its effect. For another example, let's look here at Politoed. Politoed has the ability King Song, which says ignore all colorless energy in the attack cost of each of your Poliwag, Poliwhirl, and Poliwrath attacks. So, let's say for example that we have this Mew in the active spot, which has the Memories of Dawn ability, which allows it to use the attacks of all of your basic Pokemon in play. And let's also say that we have a Poliwag on our bench, which is a basic Pokemon. Then we cannot ignore the colorless energy in the attack cost of Poliwag when it's actually Mew using the attack. We can only do that when it's Poliwag using it. More than that, if Poliwag is using the attack, since this is applied to any attack that Poliwag can use, if Poliwag has Technical Machine Blindside attached, then the attack cost of Blindside gets completely ignored since it's all colorless energy. However, there is one type of cost-altering effect that is normally applied to the Pokemon that has the attack that you are copying, that is still applied. And those are cost-altering effects that are actually printed in the attack text. So for example, if you have no cards in your hand, then you can copy Unarmed with Mew-EX, even if you do not have any energy attached, because you get to ignore all energy in the attack cost of Unarmed. Same thing happens with Conkeldur's Gutsy Swing, if Mew-EX is affected by a special condition. Here's the Alakazam EX I was mentioning earlier. A bench Pokemon can copy Dimensional Hand through a non-attack. Dimensional Hand is the attack that says this attack can be used even if this Pokemon is on the bench. So if we have a Mew EX, uppercase EX, which has the versatile ability which allows it to use Dimensional Hand, then Mew EX can use it even when Mew EX is on the bench. We now get to Pokemon Level X and Pokemon Break. Pokemon Break have this rulebox that says that they retain the attacks, abilities, weakness, resistance, and the retreat cost of the previous evolution. And Level X have this rule at the bottom that says that they can use any attack, Pokepower, or Pokebody from the previous level. Those attacks from the previous level or the previous stage are actually attacks that the Pokemon has. By the way, just as a quick aside, the level of a Pokemon is not part of the card name for deck building purposes, and it's also not part of the Pokemon name. So you are allowed to evolve a Pokemon Level X into Pokemon Break. So for example, you can evolve a Raichu Level X into Raichu Break. However, you cannot do that on the turn that you level up, and Raichu Break will not retain any Pokemon powers. So for example, it will lose this Pokebody, and it will also not retain anything from the previous level. So it will just retain the attacks, essentially. And weakness, resistance, and retreat cost. The reason is essentially that this rulebox here is interpreted very strictly, so it retains the attacks, abilities, weakness, resistance, and retreat cost, and nothing else. So no Pokebodies, and it does not retain this rule. However, Pokemon Level X, despite the fact that they do not explicitly mention them, also do retain other things, such as Pokemon items, for example, Palkia's Lustrous Orb, abilities, and ancient traits, for example, Pargosi's Theta Stop, of the previous level. So with that out of the way, we now get to Sabrina's Alakazam, which I said it is a bit of a unique case. Why is that? The reason is that its Pokemon Power, Psylink, says Sabrina's Alakazam always has a copy of every attack of your Psychic Pokemon in play. Has a copy is a type of wording that does not appear anywhere else. Usually this kind of effect would be written as can use the attacks, etc. But no, it actually has a copy. That's what it says. So there are actually no official rulings on this matter, but what I'm going to explain here is basically the current consensus among players of the Eternal format. So there has been a few discussions on this topic, and this is not necessarily everyone's opinion, but it's something that we mostly agreed on. So what did we agree on? As long as Psylink works, the attacks from other Psychic Pokemon are attacks that Sabrina's Alakazam actually has, because it says it has a copy of them, so they count as attacks that Sabrina's Alakazam actually has. This allows a few interesting strategies. Most notably, through Psylink, we can give Sabrina's Alakazam the attack Caturday. And there is Dispersion, which has an ability that says ignore all energy in the attack cost of each of your Pokemon in play that has the Caturday attack. So we can use Sabrina's Alakazam, ignoring the attack cost of any attack of any Psychic Pokemon we can manage to put into play. Do you want to see a list using this concept? Of course you do. So here's a list. This list was built by Deogenerate, and just like I said, it has a few Psychic Pokemon which have pretty powerful attacks that can be used, essentially ignoring the cost. There is one triple acceleration energy in this list, and this is because Persian's ability would allow you to ignore the cost of Cross Division GX from Espeon Deoxys-GX. However, Cross Division GX has an additional effect that happens if you have at least 3 extra energy attached, and triple acceleration energy is here mostly to pay for that extra cost. One other thing that we agreed on, again, no official ruling, is that Psylink only works while Sabrina's Alakazam is in play. So, for example, if Sabrina's Alakazam is everywhere else in your head, in your discard pile, etc., then it does not have a copy of all of those attacks. We had to have a discussion about this because the Pokemon Power does say always, but even still we decided that in general Pokemon Powers only work while they're in play, and this one is no exception. So unfortunately, if you have Sabrina's Alakazam in your discard pile and the Poltergeist in play, Sabrina's Alakazam does not count as a Pokemon that has the Mad Party attack, for example. So, we now move on through any other non-attack, and the thing that they have in common is that the copied attack is not an attack that the attacking Pokemon has. And there are a lot of ways to copy an attack through another non-attack. It can be through an ability or a Pokemon power, as we saw with numerous examples. It can be with a Pokemon tool card that can allow you to use an attack printed on it, or even other attacks. It can be with technical machine cards. It can be with other Pokemon's ability. It can be with special energies, and it can even be with stadium cards, for example. So in all of these cases, the attack that you are using is not actually an attack that the attacking Pokemon has, and everything else we said before diving in Pokemon Level-X and Pokemon Break also applies. Now, moving on to other attacks instead. The attack that you're using is the attack you have. It's not the attack that you are copying. So, for example, if this Mew EX from 151 uses Genome Hacking, which says choose one of your opponent's active Pokemon's attacks and use it as this attack to copy Flare Strike, then on the next turn Mew EX can again copy Flare Strike, because it's not using Flare Strike on the next turn, it's using Genome Hacking. And so, even if it cannot use Flare Strike due to the attack text, it's using Genome Hacking. Similarly, Mew EX can also copy Cold Snap for 2 turns in a row, because, again, when you try to use Cold Snap the second time, it checks whether Cold Snap was used during the last turn, but during the last turn, Genome Hacking was used, which is not Cold Snap. Any cost altering effects are applied to the attack you're using. So, for example, if Dimension Valley is in play, you get to reduce the attack cost of Genome Hacking. When you choose the attack to copy, you are generally allowed to choose an attack that you cannot use. So, for example, you would be able to choose to copy Lost Mine even though you do not have the necessary cards in the Lost Zone. What would happen in that case is that basically you do not actually copy that attack, and so that part of the attack actually does nothing and your attack ends. There are, however, a few exceptions. First, you cannot choose a GX or Mr. Attack if you already used it. And if you're making the choice for your opponent, so for example with this Mine Junior here, you have to choose an attack that they can use. If one is available, of course. If none are available, then Mind Games would just do nothing. So like I said, if you cannot choose an attack to copy, or if you try to copy an attack you cannot use, then that part of the attack does nothing, but you're still allowed to use that attack. So for example, if I use a skill copy, I can discard a Pokemon that has no usable attacks that I can choose, and the effect of skill copy would just be to discard that Pokemon. And I can still use Watch and Learn, even though the attack my opponent used on their last turn is one that I cannot use myself, and yeah, Watch and Learn will just do nothing, but I am allowed to use it. You can use a GX attack to copy another GX attack. So here we have a Trickster GX, which says choose one of your opponent's Pokemon's attacks and use it at this attack. You are allowed to use another GX attack. It does not count as using a GX attack twice. A bench Pokemon cannot copy Dimensional Hand through an attack. This is because, again, you're using Genome Hacking, and Genome Hacking, in this example with the Mew EX, does not have any text that allows it to be used even while on the bench. So yes, you can use Dimensional Hand even if the Pokemon using it is on the bench, but you cannot use Genome Hacking, so that does not work. So here we look at the first of the two ways to copy an attack through another attack, which is without copying the cost. Unless the attack you're using tells you otherwise, you do not need to meet the energy requirements for the attack you're copying. So for example, if we look at Togetic here, it's a Super Old card, and it has some reminder text that tells you Super Metronome copies that attack except for its energy cost. Newer cards like the Mew EX from 151 we saw earlier and Zoroark GX do not have this reminder text, and when they omit it, it's just understood that you do not need to meet the energy requirements from the original attack. Any extra costs are calculated from the cost of the attack you're using, not the cost of the attack you are copying. So for example, Alter Creation here has an attack cost of 1 metal, and if you have an extra water energy in addition to the attack cost, you get to do an extra effect. With Apex Dragon, you can choose an attack from a Dragon Pokemon in your discard pile and use it as his attack. So in particular, you can use you can copy Alter Creation GX using Apex Dragon, assuming you haven't already used your GX attack, of course. But to have the extra effect of Alter Creation GX, the water energy needs to be in addition to this Grass Fire needed to use Apex Dragon. It's not in addition to the metal here. Now we look instead at ways to copy an attack through an attack while also copying the attack cost. There are 3 main examples. Alakazam Star, which I already quickly mentioned, Ditto from Skyridge, and these 2 are the most relevant in the Eternal format currently. And there is also Ditto from Detective Pikachu, which is not that relevant in the meta, but this is the card on which you will actually find the rulings, which is why I'm citing it here. Cost altering effects are only applied to the attack you're using. They are not applied to the attack you're copying. So for example, Dimension Valley here would reduce the attack cost of skill copy. So you would be able to use a skill copy just using 2 colorless. But if you choose to copy an attack for which you do not have the energy necessary, and that energy necessary is not, no matter what, reduced by Dimension Valley, then you cannot actually copy that attack. However, once again, cost altering effects that are actually in the attack test do still apply. So for example, let's pretend Dimension Valley is not in play. I need to pay the 3 colors energy in order to use a skill copy. And if I discard this looking and choose to copy Unarmed, while I have no cards in my hand, then I do not need to respect this triple psychic energy cost. So those 3 energy can basically be of any type. Any extra costs this time around are calculated from the attack you're copying, not the attack you're using. So for example, if Alakazam Star discards Naganadel Gazlord GX and chooses to copy Chaotic Order GX, Chaotic Order GX has an extra cost requirement of 1 Psychic and 1 Darkness, and that extra energy is calculated with respect to this colorless energy in the original attack cost of Chaotic Order, not from the 3 energy of skill copy. For another example here, if Ditto copies Hitmore's Exciting Flame, the extra 3 energy needed for the additional effect are relative to this Fire colorless, not relative to the original attack cost of copy anything. So here's a little table to recap. The attacking Pokemon has the copied attack for Pokemon Level X, Pokemon Break, and Sabrina's Alakazam, but it does not have it in any other case. You are using the copied attack if you are copying it with a non-attack, but not if you are copying it through another attack. Damage altering effects, weakness, and resistance are always calculated from the attacking Pokemon. Cost altering effects are applied to the copied attack when you're copying it through a non-ability, but you are not applying them to the copied attack if you are copying it through an attack that does copy the cost. If the cost altering effects, however, is from the attack text itself, then yes, you do apply it even in that case. The extra cost is calculated from the copied attack, basically in any case, except if you're copying it through an attack that does not care about the original attack cost. Dimensional Hand can be copied from the bench by non-attacks, but not by attacks. And you cannot choose to copy an attack without meeting the necessary conditions, including the attack text when relevant. If you are copying through a non-attack, you are usually allowed to choose an attack without those conditions if you're copying through an attack, with exception that we saw. However, then that attack would just do nothing. So, here we come to the final stretch, looking at some more specific interactions. So, first we will look at skill copy more calmly, which is the attack of Alakazam Star, which we had used as an example just a few slides ago. Then we will look at attacks copying themselves. We will look at attacks like Amnesia. We will look at what happens when you try to copy the attack that was used during your opponent's last turn. And we will look at some rulings where coin flips are involved. So, skill copy, let's finally read the text more calmly. Skill copy says, discard the basic Pokemon or evolution card from your hand. There is a ruling which says that basic Pokemon of Revolution card actually means any Pokemon card, so you are allowed to discard Pokemon level X, etc. Choose one of the card's attacks. Skill copy copies that attack. So if we discarded the Pokemon Break, for example, that card has no attacks since it's not in play, so we actually would not be able to choose any of those attacks, so essentially this part of the attack would do nothing. But otherwise, we choose one of those attacks. Then it says, this attack does nothing if Alakazam Star does not have the energy necessary to use that attack. And then there's the usual reminder text, you must still do anything else required for that attack, and Alakazam Star performs that attack. One interesting ruling that surprised me a little when I first saw it is that the Pokemon gets discarded from your hand before any part of the copied attack happens. And the reason why this is surprising is that, as a general rule of thumb, damage always happens before any other effects of an attack. But discarding the Pokemon from your hand and choosing the attack to copy happens before the damage of the copied attack. Another card that basically has basically works in the same way is Slowking from Stellar Crown, in which again you have to discard the top card of your deck first, and then if you can choose an attack to copy, and then the chosen attack happens, basically. So again, with Slowking you have to discard that card first, and then later the copied attack happens. This is basically because you have to reveal the card from which you are choosing the attack before the game knows which attack to do, basically. I will also mention Team Rocket's Persian EX. It's from the Destined Rivals set, which has not properly come out yet, so the image I have here is a proxy made by Justin Basil. You can find it at this link. In any case, we do already have some rulings on this card. For example, notably for us, for its first attack, which says reveal the top 10 cards of your opponent's deck, you may choose one of the revealed Pokemon's attacks and use it at this attack. Your opponent shuffle the other cards back into their deck. Those cards are shuffled into their deck before any part of the copied attack happens. And again, this comes from a Japanese ruling because they already have the card. Now, we look at what happens when an attack copies itself. So, let's say we use Mind Games, again, which says your opponent chooses an attack from one of their Pokemon in play, use the chosen attack as this attack. If you use Mind Games and your opponent also happens to have this Mind Junior in play, then your opponent cannot choose Mind Games. So, you are not allowed to copy Mind Games with Mind Games, basically. However, your opponent is only forbidden from making this choice because they are making the choice for you. So, like I mentioned earlier, this is a bit of an exception in terms of being able to choose attacks that you cannot actually use. For an example, with you yourself making the choice, let's say both players have this Zoroark in the active. Zoroark has the Foul Play attack, which says choose one of the defending Pokemon's attacks and use it as this attack. You are able to use Foul Play, choosing to copy Foul Play. However, if you do that, then the attack will just end immediately and do nothing. There are, however, instances in which you are allowed to copy, to have an attack copy in itself without the whole effect ending immediately. So, for example, let's say your opponent has Alakazam Star in play, your active Pokemon is Mew EX, and you have an Alakazam Star of your own in your hand. So, with Mew EX, you can use Skill Copy, because you can copy it from your opponent's Alakazam Star. Then with Skill Copy, you can discard your own Alakazam Star from your hand, choosing to use a Skill Copy again. And then with this other Skill Copy, you are allowed to discard yet another card from your hand and copy an attack from there. The reason why you are allowed to use a Skill Copy to copy Skill Copy is because you are changing the game state before any choice, because with Foul Play earlier, choosing Foul Play indefinitely does not advance the game state in any way, whereas choosing Skill Copy again, in the meantime you have discarded the card from your hand, so you are not doing an infinite loop, you are advancing the game state in some way. Now, we look at Amnesia. Amnesia is an attack that says choose one of your opponent's active Pokemon's attacks. That Pokemon cannot use that attack during your opponent's next turn. It has appeared numerous times in the TCG. It also has appeared with other names, for example, Memory Skip, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to refer to this type of attack just as Amnesia. Amnesia can actually only target an attack that the defending Pokemon has, not one that, for example, it has access to because of a technical machine that it has attached, for example. However, the effect of Amnesia works on all attacks, even those that the defending Pokemon does not have. And it works on all attacks that have the same name as the targeted attack. So for example, let's say I have Honchcrow level-X in my active spot, which leveled up from this Honchcrow here. Both of these have an attack called Feint Attack. But those two attacks are different both in cost and in effect, because this one does 40 damage and this one does 30. However, if I do have this Pokemon in my active spot and my opponent uses Amnesia, targeting Feint Attack, then doesn't matter which one, I cannot use any of these two during my next turn. Moreover, if for some reason, for whatever reason, I also have access to an attack called Feint Attack on a pre-evolution, for example on this Murkrow, I still am not able to use it. Even though it's not an attack that Honchcrow has, I still am not able to use it because it has the same name as the attack targeted by Amnesia. Now, we look at what happens when you copy the attack used during your opponent's last turn. For example, we have here Sudowoodo with the Watch and Learn attack, which says if your opponent's Pokemon used an attack during his or her last turn, use it as this attack. It can happen that your opponent actually used more than one attack during the last turn. For example, if they have a Pokemon with the Omega Barrage Ancient trait that allows them to attack twice. And if they did attack twice, you get to choose which one of their attacks you copy. Moreover, this other ruling I included just for the sake of completeness is also a ruling on the special condition. If your opponent tried to attack during their last turn, but their active Pokemon was confused and they flipped tails when checking for that special condition, then that attack was actually not used. So if you use Watch and Learn, then the attack will just do nothing because your opponent's Pokemon did not use an attack. Finally, we look at rulings about coin flips. So there is this light part here, which has the assist attack, which says flip a coin. If heads, choose one of your bench Pokemon's attacks and use it at this attack. There are also a variety of effects that I'm just going to call coin reflips effect. An example here is this Victini, which has an ability that says once during your turn, after you flip any coins for an attack, you may ignore all effects of those coin flips and begin flipping those coins again. And if you use a coin reflip effect, then you rewind to the first coin flip of the attack you're using. So for example, if you use assist to copy LV.X's Thunderfang, which involves a coin flip, let's say you flip heads on assist, then you choose Thunderfang, then Thunderfang flips tails, you choose to use a Victory Star, you have to rewind all the way to the coin flip for assist. So then you have to reflip a coin for assist, and if you flip tails for assist, then that's it. And if you flip heads, then again you are able to choose Thunderfang and go on as normal. Here's where it gets complicated. So when you rewind the first coin flip, you have to return the game state to how it was basically just before that first coin flip. So for example, Wailord has an attack that says flip 2 coins and for each heads remove 3 damage counters from Wailord. Let's say we use it, we flip heads, we heal 30 damage, then we flip tails, and after the tails flip, we decide to use a coin reflip effect. So we go back, and in going back to before the first coin flip, we have to put those 3 damage counters we removed back onto Wailord. So, okay. Moreover, if your attack copies the effect of a supporter card, for example, this Sylveon here has a Wink Wink attack which allows it to copy the effect of a supporter card, then the coins flipped by the effect of the supporter card count as coin flips for your attack. So after any of those coin flips, you are allowed to use a coin reflip effect. By the way, the coins flipped by either player. So for example, with Ilima, both you and your opponent have to flip a coin at some point, and after any of those two coin flips, you are allowed to use the coin reflip effect. Now, let's say we use assist to copy Wink Wink, and we use Wink Wink to copy Ilima. So what we have done is use assist, flip a coin, heads, copy Wink Wink, okay? Then in our opponent's hand we find Ilima, we discard Ilima, each player shuffles their hand into the deck, and then each player flips a coin. Let's say I'm not happy with the result of these coin flips, then I use a reflip effect, and I have to go all the way back to the coin flip of assist. But how can I go back if both of us shuffled our hand into our deck? We cannot just unshuffle our deck, right? So what happens next? This is a bit of an open question. I know that this question has also been discussed in the professor's Discord. I am not a professor myself, so I'm not in this Discord, so but I have this piece of information from Shutterstock. To my knowledge, they have not concluded anything on what happens, and to be honest, it's fair because like it's a super absurd constructed game state that will never happen in a real game, in a real competitive game, anyways. So yeah, it's understandable that there is no official ruling on this interaction, but yeah, it's still a fun thing when you manage to find something that kind of breaks the game in a way. So, with that being said, thanks for watching. If you have any comments or questions about the rulings, feel free to comment below. Thanks again to Glacial and especially Shutterstock for the support, and I'll see you next time.